then eventually WCW is sold, and you have to go into the enemy's locker room you've been competing with for a good, 6, 7 years now, and you are in the locker room
Yeah.
of people who probably are not very happy to see you, because that means you're here, which means someone they're friends with might not get their TV time anymore.
Right.
And what is that like? That reminds me of just hanging out with your enemies all day long, trying to say, hey, can we work together?
Well, I think for the most part, the initial group that was brought in, we weren't what's the word? We weren't as big of threats as your Goldbergs and your
Mm,
Jarretts and all those guys that were on top, because they weren't coming, right? They weren't coming. They had guaranteed money. They didn't care if the company was sold, all those things. But so I don't think we had as much pressure on us. But at the same time, to your point, and I've said it like this, we're coming into a company that already had more than enough talent that wasn't getting that TV time. So now there's more cats in the locker room. Now there's more bodies around. Now there's more opportunities for someone to get looked over. So it was a little tense. But I think it was tense because how people carried themselves and handled it more than the animosity of, oh, who the hell are these guys? Because I think everybody had relationships with each other. We all knew each other from somewhere else we had worked
right,
or
right, right.
things like that. So it wasn't necessarily like get in the broom closet. That's where you belong. I think it was just the point of, and I say this all the time, there's a different culture in WWF than there was in WCW.
Mm,
And the guys in WCW weren't hip to that culture. A lot of those guys never had been anywhere else before, were never in any other locker rooms, had never done independence, had never toured the country, never worked territories. So all they knew was WCW and how WCW was run. There was no greetings and, you know, interactions like that. I mean, there were little groups of it, but there was no politically correct way of doing things in WCW. So you come into WWF and it's very I don't, not regimented in an army way, but hey, here's how things are done. Greet everybody, see what you're doing. Don't just put your bag in the middle of the floor, go to catering for 5 hours, and don't introduce yourself and leave early and all these things. Like, we as a group, we were doomed at the jump.
right. I think coming in as a giant group is one thing versus coming in if you came in individually, because
Yeah,
WCW gets purchased, showcased, WrestleMania 17, you're in the audience, and then it felt like it took like 3 months for WCW to even be showcased on TV, the invasion storyline, which people still talk about as being like, how could you screw this up? But at the
yeah,
same time, you brought it up. Like, I love, Hugh Morris. I love all these other talents, but to someone who doesn't know the middle card, upper middle card,
right.
they know Goldberg, they know Ric Flair, they know Hogan, Hall, Nash. Without them being there, obviously it's a detriment to a storyline because you're trying to make sure that these people who are coming in are the threat. But if your threat is the United States champions and the TV champions, which again, no disparaging words, they're not. They're going to compete against Steve Austin and The Rock and Undertaker and Kane and Triple H. It's kind of hard to sell, and
Right.
I don't think people look at that part. They always are like, oh, it's a terrible storyline. Man, like
Yeah,
they don't actually look at why it didn't work out, but
yeah.
at
And
the
I think it
same
was a lot
time,
of a lot of panic, right? Because you still had before you had the ECW guys that were there. Now you got WCW guys that were there. So instead of, like, ECW should have been its own entity,
yes.
still owned by, McMahon, but its own entity. That didn't happen. WCW is supposed to be its own entity,
Yep.
but it didn't happen. Now everybody's under the, even at the invasion, they had ECW shirts, WCW shirts, but we all knew at any given time, this guy joined ECW, this guy joined WW, and little by little, with no explanation, they were dwindled. But I think there was just a lot of panic of, wait a minute, we bought this company, we can't even toot our own horns because all the big names didn't come.
Yeah.
So
It looked a little awkward, but
yeah,
eventually though you had I think a WWE run that was a kind of a roller coaster, because sometimes you'd be like this dominant mean guy
yeah,
beating the shit out of people, and then randomly you would be with three people, then you're gonna be with in a tag team. It felt like they liked you, but they didn't know what to do with you. Was
yeah.
was general direction ever brought up as, hey, maybe we should do this, or just,
No.
hey, be Bill DeMott and kill people?
Well, yeah, Hugh Morris. It was even said that they wanted to change the name and everything right off the bat, So I think I was kind of excited about that just to see what their vision was. But as I was going, like I branched off right away from when we got there. Within I don't know how many months to a year, whatever, I slowed down because I was off doing the tough enoughs.
Yeah.
And then I'd come back and be hot, but then I was off doing another tough enough, or I was off doing a thing. So that I know that didn't necessarily help my consistency. I thought I was having a good run and we were going somewhere with Rikishi.
Mm-hmm.
Rikishi and I had a good thing that was going. And then when he was done with the company, as you know, storylines go different.